Hello, and welcome to Book 5, Chapter 26 of You Should Be Reading. Today on You Should Be Reading, I'd like to talk about not a book, but about genres. Specifically, the type of genres that I tend to enjoy reading. Now, genres tend to be a subtype of a book. Usually books are tended to be divided into either fiction or nonfiction. Nonfiction, of course, being anything that is factually true, anything that actually happened. Biographies, autobiographies tend to fall under uh, nonfiction, as do certain other books that are based, that are about like true events. Um, um, some of Dave Barry's books that are all about his articles that he's written, I believe, are nonfiction. Generally, I tend to be a fan of fiction. Not always, but generally. Um, in this particular book of You Should Be Reading, Book 5, a little while back, not that long ago, I read People I Want to Punch in the Throat, which is a nonfiction book, but not usually the sort that I tend to read. Usually I'm a fiction man. And of fiction, I tend to enjoy certain kinds. Uh, Science fiction, satire, uh, drama, romance, action adventure, mystery, horror, and fantasy, as well as urban fantasy. These tend to be the genres that I have a lot of books. Um, Now, there are also genres I've seen called children's books and young adult books, but I don't really consider them genres as more just what they're aimed towards. Because just because a book is a children's book doesn't necessarily tell you what kind of book it's going to be, what genre. You can have children's books that are science fiction and children's books that are fantasy. You see what I mean? So I'd just like to talk a little bit about those. Um, Satire tends to come in a lot when it tends to be mixed in with other works. Terry Pratchett's, for example, the Discworld series, is highly satirical because it shines a light on the real world by using the Discworld as an example of these real world events, showing how ludicrous some of them are. One of the ones in particular that he deals with is terrorism with the dwarves, like religious terrorism and religious fundamentalists. He tends to have a series of dwarves. There's a subset of the dwarves in the Discworld that are like religious fanatics and are basically terrorists um, when you get right down to it. And he kind of shines a light on the satiricalness. He puts that satire light on them. Um, what other ones do I have here? Drama. I love drama when it comes to anything. It also tends to be mixed in with other genres as well. Same for action adventure. I don't read a lot of just strict action adventure books. They're usually mixed in with either science fiction, fantasy, urban fantasy, or horror or mystery. Um, I've got a few horror books from Stephen King. I'm a big fan of him. I've got a couple Dean Koontz books as well on my shelves that I've read from horror. And I'm pretty sure I have the first 6 books of the Necroscope series by Brian Lumley. I've only ever read the first of it a while, years and years ago. Uh, it's been a long time, but I ended up buying a bunch of them when I got into it. I may have to go back and reread them now that I'm a little older. What else? Uh, Science fiction is fairly obvious. It's all about space and aliens usually. Uh, Not always, but usually. Sometimes it's just set in the future, like cyberpunk. That's technically science fiction. Cyberpunk and steampunk are kind of their own genres in a way, and I enjoy those as well. Um, but they tend to also be lumped in with other ones. You have like cyberpunk, uh, science fiction, cyberpunk fantasy. You could even have. Don't discount it; it could happen. What else? Romance. Yes, I've recently read some romance series. Um, in the Shadow Chaser series, it deals with some romance, as well as the Crystal Singer trilogy has romantic elements and is billed as a bit of a science fiction romance series, and I enjoyed those as well. Uh, don't knock romance just because you think, oh, ooh, cooties, it's just going to be a bunch of like Harlequin romance. Don't think that. Don't equate romance as a genre with the Harlequin romance type books, because those are basically softcore porn books. They're erotic books, and erotic and romance are not the same thing. Usually, you tend to get romance in both, but sometimes you can get some eroticism in a romance book. That's fine. But don't knock romance. It can be quite a powerful and stirring genre uh, to your emotions. So just keep that in mind. Mystery. I started reading some mysteries. Got some Ian Rankin on there, some Kay Finch, the Black Cat or Bad Luck Cat mysteries, El Gato Diablo. Um, they are quite charming and interesting. Um, I've always liked my mystery and whatnot and my crime drama, as many people will know that are fans of this channel. What else? Fantasy. Now, fantasy comes in two particular varieties. You got the urban fantasy, as I mentioned, which is generally modern day-ish, but also with fantastical elements like monsters and magic and whatnot. And then you've got pure fantasy, which deals with usually a world that isn't up to modern day standards in terms of technology and whatnot. Usually it's swords and sorcery and whatnot, the really high fantasy. Um, but there's some pretty good stuff in there. I don't often read into autobiographies and such. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It all depends on the autobiography and the person. If I'm interested in the person, I will be interested in the biography. And I haven't really read many. I think I've read like one biography, and that was a while back, of Mick Foley, the wrestler. It was lent to me by a friend of mine. I enjoyed that highly because I was interested in Mick Foley, the wrestler, and his the interesting things that happened in his life. He's been through a lot of punishment and pain, that man. Oh, what else is there? The action and the adventure. As I said, those usually action adventure. Adventure specifically tends to get lumped in with fantasy. Action tends to get lumped in with sci-fi a lot. Not necessarily always, but it tends to a lot. So, yeah, there's a lot of really good genres out there that I tend to read. And then there's a bunch of others that are like purely educational. Um, like there's like math and history, and then there's encyclopedias and dictionaries. I used to read encyclopedias when I was young. The Childcraft Encyclopedia and the Funk and Wagnalls encyclopedias. I had a collection of both of those, and I used to read through them quite regularly. They were quite interesting to me at the time. It was where I learned uh, some of the famous people that I share a birthday with. So that's pretty cool. What else? What else? I don't think there's too much else to talk about in terms of genres. I am interested in what genres you all like to read. So please, after you're done tapping that like button, if you like what I'm doing, and tapping that subscribe button if you haven't already, so you can be kept apprised of when I do new videos, please throw a comment in the comment section and let me know what genres you like to read. I am interested in getting a discussion going on this and why you like reading these genres. Please throw those comments in the comment section. Let's get a discussion going with some people. And until next time, you all take care and keep reading. Keep reading. Because 2018 is going to be a good year for books, I think. And when we get there, which is going to be very soon, when we get there, let's welcome books and reading with open arms. So do all that, and until next time, my friends, you all keep reading, and I'll see you next time and next year.